Hello, everyone. This is Ace, and this is the third episode of this channel, Ace the Exam. And at the same time, this is the first episode of this channel in the section of TOEFL listening. I launched this channel because I felt something significant related to education has been lost on other similar instructional channels and videos. That was uh, analyzing word by word and sentence by sentence to help the students gain the meaning, the meaning of English contents, the real meaning of English contents. It is so important because I felt that, without any offense, I felt that other most other similar channels are engaged in teaching learners and test takers some minor know-hows, some technical know-hows. While they may be essential, they are not enough. They fail to take the hands of the students and guide them to read sentence by sentence, to listen sentence by sentence, and word by word, to gain the meaning of a passage from the blank space between lines. This is so important. In the section of listening, the TOEFL exam, as you may know, many students have major challenges with. I have always been bombarded by my students' questions. I understand movies and TV shows, but I don't understand TOEFL listening task. I understand completely what the professor says, but I can't answer the questions correctly and questions the like. You know what is important on TOEFL task, all TOEFL task, reading, listening, writing, and speaking is being interactive, and this interaction takes utmost significance in the listening task. It should be interactive, and I see many students constantly take notes while listening. So this is not listening. This is a note-taking task, and it goes without saying that with note-taking, you cannot pass successfully your listening task and gain a higher score, gain a upper 25 score. So it is evident that this is not possible. How can you follow and read conversations and lectures while the professor talks smoothly and fluently along the lecture? So it seems impossible. And the best strategy for this is being interactive. Uh, Listen and shadowing, tell yourself what happened. What did the professor say? What did the professor say to the student, and what did the professor student say to to the professor? What happened? Because sometimes I feel that students think that they should memorize the information the lecturer says. For example, if the professor discusses a theory, say the relativity theory in physics, they think that they should take notes about the details of this theory, what the professor said. But on the question section, you may not encounter any question about the details of the theory. Instead, you may be asked, what was the professor's opinion about the relativity theory? What was the professor's attitude about this theory? Why does the professor say this? That there are attitude questions, and this means that in the listening section, you don't merely need to listen to the content. You should pay attention to the stance of the professor, to the professor's attitude, or if this is a conversation, to the attitude of people engaged in the conversation. So for this, you need to be interactive. You always tell yourself what happened, what was the professor opinion, and questions the like and the things the like. And you should be interactive. You nod your head when you absorb information, and also this interaction makes the practicing delightful for you, interesting for you. And this is so important. We are going to begin this episode, but as usual, I like to mention an old Chinese proverb before beginning. If you give a man a fish, he would eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he would eat for a lifetime. Now we begin this episode. We are going to listen to a conversation task. And as you may know, conversation tasks on the TOEFL exam happen within an academic environment between a student, mostly between a student and the professor, or a student and an academic staff. Before playing this piece, it is worth mentioning that while you listen, I pause on and off to give you further information, details, hints, and tips. So now we begin to listen this piece.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a business professor.
Thanks for seeing me, Professor Jackson.
Sure, Tom. What can I do for you?
I'm going to do my term project on service design. What you see as a customer, the physical layout of the building, the parking lot. And I thought I'd focus on various kinds of eateries, restaurants, coffee shops, cafeterias. So I'd also analyze where you order your food, where you eat, and so on.
We listened to the first 25 seconds of this piece. And firstly, we understood that the initial stance of the student is appreciative. Appreciative here means thankful, because the student began his words with thanking the professor for giving him the opportunity to visit her and share his ideas with her. But the second point, why did the student come to see the professor? He came to visit the professor to share his ideas about his term project. But what is his term project going to be? In his term project, the student is going to study service design from a customer related standpoint. And customer is an essential keyword here, because customers are the receivers of business services. And this service design means a kind of design in offering the service that customers receive the best, the most, or receive the service in the most optimal way. And for this purpose, the student is going to explore the physical layout within eateries, like restaurants or coffee shops. And according to the student's word, this physical layout means where customers stand to place their orders, where customers stand to receive their orders, where customers go to eat, and so on, and things to like. These are the points of the first 25 seconds of this piece. But as a hint to improve your listening, it is worth mentioning that, you imagine yourself in the place of the addressee of the conversation. For example, when the student is talking, you imagine yourself in the place of the professor. Think of yourself as the professor, and not yourself when you approve the student's talk, and when you acknowledge what the student says. Nod your head like you nod your head in the real world. This is kind of an acting out. This is the same interaction I need. And tell yourself what did the student say. This way, just go over the information while at the same time you perceive information, you absorb information. With little practice, you can master it. This is an easy task, and I promise this is an easy task. And if you want to take notes, how can you? I don't want to say that this is an impossible act, but how can you take notes while this student is talking this fluently? So this is difficult, and definitely you will miss some significant and crucial pieces of information, and as a result, your score will suffer. You will be marked down in the listening task. All right, we continue listening to the rest of the conversation.
And so on.
Wait, I thought you were going to come up with a hypothetical business plan for an amusement park. Isn't that what you emailed me last week? I could have sworn. Oh, I'm thinking of a Tom from another class, Tom Benson. Sorry.
No problem. I did email you my idea too, though.
Oh, that's right. I remember now. Restaurants, yeah.
All right, we listen to the next 21 seconds of this conversation. In this part, the professor responds to the student, but she has mistaken him for another student with the name Tom Benson. And from this mistake, we infer that perhaps the name of this student is also Tom, because the professor has mistaken two Tom for each other. And she says that, but you have emailed me an idea about a business model to put up an amusement park. And the student's stance here is confused. The student is confused because he never emailed the professor an idea about an amusement park or a business model for. And the professor is sure about this, sure about her misconception, and she says, "I could have sworn." We use the verb swear to God, swear to angels, swear to saints when we are sure about something. And since the professor thinks this is the same Tom that emailed her about an idea about an amusement park, she says, "I could have sworn." But later, the professor understands that she is wrong, so she corrects herself and says, "Oh, I have mistaken you for another student, Tom Benson from a different class." And here, during this period, the student, in order to help the professor to feel less ashamed because of her mistake, he says, "I also did email my idea about service design to you." In order to help the professor, actually, he says that in order to help the professor to feel less ashamed because of her mistake. And the professor responds, "Oh, restaurant." And by saying this word, restaurant, she shows that she acknowledges her mistake, and she sends a signal to the student that I understand your words, and you can continue talking about your idea. So now we continue listening to the rest of this piece.
So here's my question. I read something about service standard that kind of confused me. What's the difference between service design and service standard?
Service standard refers to what a company, employees are ideally supposed to do in order for everything to operate smoothly, the protocols to be followed.
Oh, okay.
So backing up, service design is, think of the cafeteria here on campus. There are several food counters, right? All with big, clear signs to help you find what you're looking for. Soups, salads, desserts. So you know exactly where to go to get what you need. And when you're finished picking up your food, where do you go?
To the cash registers.
And where are they?
Right before you get to the seating area.
Exactly. A place that you would logically move to next.
All right, we listen to the next 50 seconds of this conversation. And this piece, we understood the meanings of service standard and service design. Actually, the student asks the professor to draw a contrast between service standard and service design because they have confused the student, and the professor says service standard refers to a set of protocols that employees in a business observe and follow for the business to operate smoothly. But as for the service design, the professor mentioned an example that is familiar to the students to get across her points better. She points to the cafeteria on the campus that the student is familiar with. She asks the students, if you want to eat or drink something, if you go to the cafeteria on the campus, where would you go first? So the student answers, I would go to the food counters where foods are placed. Again, the professor asks, where would you go next? And he says, I would go to the cash register to pay for my chosen food. Again, the professor asks, where would you go next? And he says, I would go to the seating place. And the seating place is where you can find tables and chairs and you can sit and serve your food. So by mentioning this, actually the professor wants to make the students think about the physical layout within that eatery, within the cafeteria on the campus. Different places within the cafeteria are designed in such a way that customers are not lost within the eatery. First they go to the food counters after choosing their food, so they want to eat it. But also they need to pay for their food first before eating. So on the way to eating, on the way to the seating place, they go to the cash register to pay for their food. Actually, the interior design within the cafeteria is in such a way that the cash register is located between food counters and seating place, that customers on the way to the seating place can easily pay for their food. This is a logical way, and this is a kind of design that facilitates service offering within the cafeteria. Actually makes the service offering within the cafeteria optimum. And by mentioning this, the professor wants the student to understand the meaning of service design. Again, we listen to the next part of the conversation.
To next.
Not every place is like that. This past weekend was my friend's birthday, and I went to a bakery in town to pick up a cake for her party. And the layout of the place was weird. People were all in each other's way, standing in the wrong lines to pay, to place orders. Oh, and another thing, I heard this bakery makes really good apple pie, so I wanted to buy a slice of it too.
Okay.
There was a little label that said apple pie, where it's supposed to be, but there wasn't any left.
And that's what's called a service gap. Maybe there wasn't enough training for the employees, or maybe they just ran out of pie that day. But something's wrong with the process, and the service standard wasn't being met.
Okay, I think I get it. Anyway,
We listen to the next 42 seconds of this conversation. In the previous part, the professor pins down the definitions of service standard and service design. And in order to get across the meaning of service design to the students, he pointed to the cafeteria on the campus, which was familiar to the student. And we later understand that this service offering within the cafeteria on the campus is an example of a good one. This is the service offering, the service design in the campus cafeteria is a good one. And here in this part, the student responds to the professor, and in order to understand whether or not he has perceived the correct meaning of service design, he mentions an example of bad service design. He says that within the last week, there was the birthday of his friend, so he went to a bakery in the town to order a cake for the birthday. But in the bakery, people were kind of lost. They were all in each other's way, and they stood in the wrong lines to place their orders, and so on. Up till now, up till this part, according to what the professor said about service design, we understand that the student has perceived the meaning of service design correctly, and this is an example of a bad service design, since people were kind of lost within the bakery, and the service offering of the bakery is not good. But the student continues his talk, and he says that he has heard that that bakery offers excellent apple pies, and he wanted to try a slice. So within the bakery, there were signs where customers can procure slices of apple pie, and he went there, and upon arriving there, he understands that there is no apple pie left. So this is a contradiction, because there were signs where customers can find apple pies, and when he went there, he understand that there was no apple pie left. And the student thinks that this is also an example of a bad service design. But the professor makes it clear to the student that this is not related to service design. This is actually related to service standard, and it is actually called service gap. And this service gap can be explained by the employee's lack of responsibility, or lack of training, or indeed there may indeed not enough slices of apple pie in the store. So this is the professor says that this is not related to service design. This is related to service standard. that the bakery didn't follow. And as a response to the student, as a response to the professor, the student says, I understand. I get. I think I get. I understand. Again, we continue listening to the last part of this conversation.
Anyway, since part of the requirements for the term project is to visit an actual place of business, do you think I could use our cafeteria? They seem to have a lot of the things I'm looking for.
Well, campus businesses like the cafeteria or bookstore don't quite follow the kinds of service models we're studying in class. You should go to some other local establishment, I'd say.
I see.
But just call the manager ahead of time so they aren't surprised.
All right, you listen to the last section of this conversation. In this part, the student and the professor are engaged in talking about the term project itself and its requirements. And the student says, since as a part of the project, since visiting a business in person is a part of the project, is a requirement for the project, can he visit campus businesses? And the professor implicitly responds, no. Because according to her, campus businesses like the cafeteria that we discussed or the bookstore on the campus are not the kinds of businesses that they have been discussing in the class. And the last sentence of this conversation is a recommendation of the professor for the student, and she says that if you wanted to visit a local establishment or a local store as part of your study, please in advance inform the manager in order not to surprise them with your visit. An interesting point here in the last section of this conversation is that the professor mentioned bookstore. And when you hear the word bookstore, you may wonder, they were not engaged in talking about books or bookstores. Why the professor mentioned bookstore here? You know, the professor just cited bookstore to point to a kind of business on the campus that they have not discussed in the class. All right, now we are directed to the question sections.
Why does the student go to see the professor?
This is the first question of this conversation, and as usual, our general strategy for answering TOEFL questions is to reject the incorrect options rather than isolate or find the correct one. We begin to check the options and try to reject them. And if we fail to reject an option, that option is the answer for the question. So the first one, to find out all the requirements for a project. Was this the reason the student went to see the professor? No. The student went to see the professor to discuss the subject of his term project, and the subject is service design. And although they were discussed a requirement of the project, but not all the requirements of the project. And that requirement they discussed was visiting a business in person. So this option is clearly rejected because it says the student went to see the professor to talk about all the requirements for the project. No, this is not correct. The second option, to discuss a service gap at a restaurant. Was this the Main purpose of the student of visiting the professor? No. Although they talked about a service gap in the bakery in the town, but this was not the main purpose of the student to go to visit the professor. Again, this is rejected. The third option, to get help understanding concepts relevant to his project. This option seems correct because the student asks the professor what is the difference between service standard and service design. And this was the main question the student propounded in the conversation. Firstly, he cited the subject he has chosen for his term project, and then he asked his question. So this seems the correct option for this question, but we check the remaining option too. The last option is to get help with designing a business plan. No, a business plan was not the intention of the student. He actually wanted to study the service design in eateries. And his focus was eateries, restaurants, and coffee shops, and so on. But a business plan the business plan has been mentioned in the conversation because the professor has mistaken the student with another student from a different class who emailed the professor a business plan for putting up an amusement park. So this was not a business plan, was not the intention of the student to see the professor. And this option is clearly rejected since we rejected option 1, option 2, and option 4. Option 3 is the correct option, and this is the answer to this question.
Why does the professor mention a student in another class?
To answer this question, we check the options, but why does the professor mention a student in another class? The professor actually has mistaken the student in the conversation for another student in a different class. And this was her mistake. The first option says to describe an interesting topic for a project. No. During this misconception, the professor cites an idea, and that idea belongs to that student, the student in a different class. And the idea is a business model for putting up an amusement park. But the professor never mentioned this to demonstrate an interesting topic, to say an interesting topic for a project. No, the student in the conversation has chosen his subject of interest for his term project. And the professor never suggested anything to the student to do as the subject of his term project. So this option is clearly rejected. Option 2, to explain the cause of her initial confusion. This option seems correct because, firstly, when the student in the conversation uttered his idea, the professor replied to him that, but you sent me, but you actually emailed me a different idea, an idea about a business model for an amusement park. And the student in the conversation was confused. And later, the professor herself understood that she made a confusion, so she corrected herself And she mentioned another student, Tom Benson, from a different class, to say that she made a mistake and to acknowledge that this mistake was her bad. So, due to that, the professor mentioned another student from a different class. So, this option seems correct. This is the candidate to be an answer for this question. And we continue checking the remaining options. Option 3, to point out that she has not received emails from all her students yet. No, this issue has not been discussed in the conversation, and the professor never mentioned this, that I haven't received emails from all my students yet. No, she just said that she received an email about an idea, a business model to build up an amusement park. And this is the only place in the conversation that the professor and the topic of emails has been discussed. This is the only place. And receiving emails from all her students has not been discussed in the conversation. Yeah. So this option is again clearly rejected. Option 4, to indicate that she has several students doing projects about restaurants. No, this was not a kind of issue being discussed in the conversation, and the professor never mentioned this. And yeah, this is clearly rejected. And the correct option that answers the question is the second one, to explain the cause of her initial confusion.
Why does the professor talk about the cafeteria on campus?
The professor mentions the cafeteria on campus to get across her points about service design to the student. And according to her, the cafeteria offers an excellent service design because, as we discussed, they have placed cash register between where foods are placed and and the seating place where people go and eat their food. And according to her, this was an effective design because customers move within the cafeteria according to a logic in an optimum way. So the first option that says to give an example of an effective service design seems correct, and this is a good candidate to answer the question. But we also need to check the remaining options. In the second option, we have to illustrate how service standards can inform service design. No, the professor does not mention the relationship between service standards and service design in her talk. No, this issue has not been discussed in the conversation. So this option is clearly rejected. Option 3, to help the man understand a service problem. No, a service problem was mentioned later in the conversation when the man and the woman, they're actually the student and the professor, were engaged in talking about the service in a bakery, in a local bakery. And the service problem was actually a service gap. In the bakery, there were signs to guide customers where they can procure apple pie. And when customers arrived there, there were no apple pie left. And this was a contradiction. This was a gap, and this was the kind of problem, service problem, that the professor pointed to. And this service problem has nothing to do with the cafeteria, and the professor never mentioned the cafeteria to talk about this service problem. So this option again is obviously rejected. Finally, to illustrate the concept of a service gap, no. Service gap has been discussed in the conversation when the student discussed his experience of visiting a local bakery and not the cafeteria on the campus. Again, this option is clearly rejected. Therefore, after rejecting option 2, option 3, and option 4, option 1 is the correct answer to the question.
What do the speakers imply about the bakery the student went to recently?
In this question, we are going to choose 2 options as an answer for this question. The first one, the apple pie he bought there was not as good as it usually is. The student in the conversation never bought any apple pie from the bakery. And according to his words, there was a rumor flying around the town that that bakery offers excellent apple pie. So this option is clearly rejected. Second one, the bakery's service design was inefficient. That seems correct because according to the conversation, there were 2 examples of service design. The first one, a good one, that was in the cafeteria on the campus, and the bad one that was mentioned by the student according to his experience of visiting the local bakery, that people stood in wrong lines to place their orders. They varied each other's way and so on. So this means that service design was inefficient. It was a bad service design. The third option, the bakery needs additional employees to fix a service gap. What was service gap according to conversation? According to the conversation, a service gap happens when we have a lack of products in our store, and on the other hand, we have signs in the store guiding customers where they can procure their products. And actually, we have a lack of products, but we don't place signs that our product has been out of stock, has been out of sale. So this is where a service gap comes to the picture, and the professor stated that service gap can be explained by the lack of training on the part of employees or the lack of product in the store. And he never mentioned that the store needs additional employees or the lack of employees. So this option seems incorrect. And we check the last option. The bakery did not meet a service standard. This is the correct option because the professor explicitly mentioned this. He mentioned this that obviously the bakery never met a service standard. So these are the 2 options that can answer the question.
What does the professor say the student should do for his project?
Before answering this question, I would like to emphasize once again that when on the TOEFL exam listening task please pay attention to the beginning of the task and the end of the task, because over 70% you will encounter a question that its answer lies at the beginning of the task or the end of the task, and significantly the end of the task. It's so important. And now we have a question that its answer lies at the end of the conversation. You know, in the last sentence of the conversation, the professor makes a recommendation to the student, and she says that if you want to visit a business, a local establishment, please inform its manager in advance. And now we check the options. Option 1, compare an on-campus service model with an off-campus one. No, the professor made it clear to the student that he should never visit on-campus businesses like the bookstore on the campus or the cafeteria on the campus, because there are not kinds of business that they have discussed in the class. And the professor told the student that he should visit local establishments, local stores for his purpose. This option is clearly rejected. The second one, interview the service manager and employees at the cafeteria. No, the cafeteria was on the campus, and the professor mentioned that the student should never visit the cafeteria, and also she never mentioned that the student should have an interview with service manager or employees in the conversation. Again, this is incorrect, and we reject this option. The third one, recommend service improvements at the cafeteria and the bookstore. No, the professor mentioned the bookstore and the cafeteria just to make it clear to the student that there are not kinds of business that they have discussed in the class, and the students should not explore such on-campus businesses for his purpose. Now that we rejected the first three options, the last option seems the correct one, but we analyze it. All right. The last option, analyze the service design of a nearby restaurant. Yeah, that's correct, because you know the professor told the student that you should go and visit local establishments or local store, local businesses, local restaurants. Local here means nearby, out of campus. And she also told the student that before visiting the place, inform the manager in advance. So this option seems correct, and this is the correct option answering this question.